24. Paraphrasing complex statements. As noted earlier, compound statements may be built up from statements which are themselves compound statements. There are no theoretical limits to the complexity of compound statements, although there are practical limits, based on human linguistic capabilities. We have already dealt with a number of complex statements in connection with the various non-standard connectives. We now systematically consider complex statements that involve various combinations of non-standard connectives. For example, we are interested in what happens when both unless and only if appear in the same sentence. In paraphrasing and symbolizing complex statements, it is best to proceed systematically, in small steps. As one gets better, many intermediate steps can be done in one's head. On the easy ones, perhaps all the intermediate steps can be done in one's head. Still, it is a good idea to reason through the easy ones systematically, in order to provide practice in advance of doing the hard ones. The first step in paraphrasing statements is step 1. Identify the simple atomic statements, and abbreviate them by uppercase letters. In most of the exercises, certain words are entirely capitalized in order to suggest to the student what the atomic statements are. For example, in the statement J and K are sophomores, the atomic formulas are J and K. At this stage of analysis, it is important to be clear concerning what each atomic formula stands for. It is especially important to be clear that each letter abbreviates a complete sentence. For example, in the above statement, J does not stand for J, since this is not a sentence. Rather, it stands for J is a sophomore. Similarly, K does not stand for K, but rather K is a sophomore. Having identified the simple statements, and having established their abbreviations, the next step is step 2. Identify all the connectives, noting which ones are standard, and which ones are not standard. Having identified the atomic statements and the connectives, the next step is step 3. Write down the first hybrid formula, making sure to retain internal punctuation. The first hybrid formula is obtained from the original statement by replacing the simple statements by their abbreviations. A hybrid formula is so called because it contains both English words and symbols from sentential logic. Punctuation provides important clues about the logical structure of the sentence. The first 3 steps may be better understood by illustration. Consider the following example. Example 1. E1 If neither J nor K is working, then we will go on vacation. In this example, the simple statements are JJ is working, KK is working, V we go on vacation, and the connectives are if, then standard neither, nor non-standard. Thus, our first hybrid formula is H1 if neither J nor K, then V. Having obtained the first hybrid formula, the next step is to step 4. Identify the major connective. Here, the commas are important clues. In H1, the placement of the comma indicates that the major connective is if, then, the structure being if neither J nor K, then V. Having identified the major connective, we go on to the next step. Step 5. Symbolize the major connective if it is standard. Otherwise, paraphrase it into standard form, and go back to step 4, and work on the resulting hybrid formula. In H1, the major connective is if, then, which is standard, so we symbolize it, which yields the following hybrid formula. H2 neither J nor K. V. Notice that, as we symbolize the connectives, we must provide the necessary logical punctuation, that is, parentheses. At this point, the next step is step 6. Work on the constituent formulas separately. In H2, the constituent formulas are C1 neither J nor K, C2 V. The latter formula is fully symbolic, so we are through with it. The former is not fully symbolic, so we must work on it further. It has only one connective, neither, nor, which is therefore the major connective. It is not standard, so we must paraphrase it, which is done as follows. C1 neither J nor K, P1 not J and not K. The latter formula is in standard form, so we symbolize it as follows. S1 J and K. Having dealt with the constituent formulas, the next step is step 7. Substitute symbolizations of constituents back into original hybrid formula. In our first example, this yields S2 J and K V. Once you have a purely symbolic formula, the final step is step 8. Translate the formula back into English and compare with the original statement. This is to make sure the final formula says the same thing as the original statement. In our example, translating yields the following. T1 If J is not working and K is not working, then we will go on vacation. Comparing this with the original, E1 If neither J nor K is working, then we will go on vacation. We see they are equivalent, so we are through. Our first example is simple insofar as the major connective is standard. In many statements, all the connectives are non-standard, and so they have to be paraphrased in accordance with the principles discussed in previous sections. Consider the following example. Example 2E2 you will pass unless you goof off, provided that you are intelligent. In this statement, the simple statements are I you are intelligent, P you pass, G you goof off, and the connectives are unless non-standard provided that non-standard. Thus, the first stage of the symbolization yields the following hybrid formula. H1P unless G, provided that I next, we identity the major connective. Once again, the placement of the comma tells us that provided that is the major connective, the overall structure being P unless G, provided that I we cannot directly symbolize provided that, since it is non-standard. We must first paraphrase it. At this point, we recall that provided that is equivalent to if, which is a simple variant of if, then. This yields the following successive paraphrases. H2P unless G, if I H3 if I, then P unless G and H3, the major connective is if, then, which is standard, so we symbolize it, which yields H4IP unless G. We next work on the parts. The antecedent is finished, so we move to the consequent. CP unless G. This has one connective, unless, which is non-standard, so we paraphrase and symbolize it as follows. CP unless gram PP if not gram, P if not G, then P, SGP. Substituting the parts back into the whole, we obtain the final formula. FIGP. Finally, we translate F back into English, which yields T if you are intelligent, then if you do not goof off then you will pass. Although this is not the exact same sentence as the original, it should be clear that they are equivalent in meaning. Let us consider an example similar to example 2. Example 3E3 unless the exam is very easy, I will make 100 only if I study. In this example, the simple statements are E the exam is very easy, H I make 100 S I study, and the connectives are unless non-standard only if non-standard. Having identified the logical parts, we write down the first hybrid formula. H1 unless E, H only if S. Next, we observe that unless is the principal connective. Since it is non-standard, we cannot symbolize it directly, so we paraphrase it, as follows. H2 if not E, then H only if S. We now work on the new hybrid formula H2. We first observe that the major connective is if, then. Since it is standard, we symbolize it, which yields H3 not E. H only if S. Next, we work on the separate parts. The antecedent is simple, and is standard form, being symbolized AE. The consequent has just one connective only if, which is non-standard, so we paraphrase and symbolize it as follows. CH only if SP not H if not SP if not S, then not HSSH. Next, we substitute the parts back into H3, which yields FESH. Finally, we translate F back into English, which yields T if the exam is not very easy, then if I do not study then I will not get 100. Comparing this statement with the original statement, we see that they say the same thing. The next example is slightly more complicated, being a conditional in which both constituents are conditionals. Example 44 if Jones will work only if Smith is fired, then we should fire Smith if we want the job finished. In E4, the simple statements are J Jones works if we do fire Smith, S we should fire Smith, W we want the job finished, and the connectives are if, then standard only if non-standard if non-standard. Next, we write down the first hybrid formula, which is H1 if J only if F, then S if W. The comma placement indicates that the principal connective is if. Then. It is standard, so we symbolize it, which yields H2J only if F S if W. Next, we work on the constituents separately. The antecedent is paraphrased and symbolized as follows. AJ only if FP not J if not FP if not F, then not JSFJ. The consequent is paraphrased and symbolized as follows. CS if WP if W, then SSWS. Substituting the constituent formulas back into H2 yields FFJWS. The direct translation of F into English reads as follows. T if we do not fire Smith then Jones does not work, then if we want the job finished then we should fire Smith. The complexity of the conditional structure of the sentence renders a direct translation difficult to understand. The major problem is the stuttering at the beginning of the sentence. The best way to avoid this problem is to opt for a more idiomatic translation, just as we do with negations. Specifically, we replace some if-thens by simple variant forms. The following is an example of a more natural, idiomatic translation. T if Jones will not work if Smith is not fired, then if we want the job finished we should fire Smith. Comparing this paraphrase, in more idiomatic English, with the original statement, we see that they are equivalent in meaning. Our last example involves the notion of necessary condition. Example 5E5 In order to put on the show it will be necessary to find a substitute, if neither the leading lady nor her understudy recovers from the flu. In E5, the simple statements are P we put on the show, S we find a substitute, L the leading lady recovers from the flu, U the understudy recovers from the flu, and the connectives are in order to, It is necessary to non-standard if non-standard neither, nor non-standard the first hybrid formula is H1 H order that P. It is necessary that S, if neither L nor U. Next, the principal connective is if, which is not in standard form. Converting it into standard form yields H2 if neither L nor U. Then in order that P. It is necessary that S here, the principal connective is if, then, which is standard, so we symbolize it as follows. H3 neither L nor U. In order that P. It is necessary that S. We next attack the constituents. The antecedent is paraphrased as follows. A neither L nor U. P not L and not U. S L and U. The consequent is paraphrased as follows. C. In order that P. It is necessary that SPS is necessary for PP. If not S, then not PSSP. Substituting the parts back into H3, we obtain FL and USP. Translating F back into English, we obtain T. If the leading lady does not recover from the flu and her understudy does not recover from the flu, then if we do not find a substitute then we do not put on the show. Comparing T with the original statement, we see that they are equivalent in meaning. By way of concluding this chapter, let us review the basic steps involved in symbolizing complex statements.